All right, so it's been a while since I posted anything, and that is because I've been busy rekindling an old interest, an old hobby interest of mine, which is miniature painting. Um, and it started because I picked up a copy of the new Gale Force 9 Aliens game, Another Glorious Day in the Core. Also picked up the expansions, the Get Away From Her You Bitch expansion and the Ultimate Badasses expansion, which basically the Get Away From Her expansion includes the Power Loader and the Alien Queen and rules for incorporating that into your campaign. And then the Ultimate Badasses includes more of the Marines from the movie. It includes Apone, Dietrich, Crow, Drake, Wierzbowski, and Burke. I'm not sure why Burke is included in the Ultimate Badasses box, because he definitely is not. I guess he's bad in the fact that he's the villain in the movie, but he is not an ultimate badass. And so the reason I wanted to get this set painted was because my local gaming group, a friend of mine runs sort of a mini con every spring, and so this is our return to holding a mini con since COVID-19 hit, and one of the games that we're going to play at this little con next weekend is Aliens. And so I've spent the past, I'd say month and a half, 2 months maybe, almost, painting up all of the figures that came with the core set and the expansions. So you can see here, and the lighting's not great, but I've painted all of the Marines as well as the civilian characters. You've got Newt here, the little girl that Ripley saves. The sculpt of it has her, in the movie she puts one of the Marines' helmets on, and salutes him with the affirmative at some point. We've got Lieutenant Gorman here, who's typically useless in the movie until he kind of redeems himself at the end. And then, of course, there's Bishop, Lance Henriksen's android character, and Carter Burke, who is kind of the closest thing to a villain in the movie, aside from the aliens themselves. I'm not sure why they've made a figure of him. I'm not sure who would want to play as Burke in the game. There's Hicks with his shotgun, played by Michael Biehn in the movie. We've got Frost, who falls over the stairwell when he gets incinerated by Dietrich in the reactor room towards the beginning, the first major encounter in the movie. And there's Dietrich, the aforementioned Dietrich, who she is the first one to get grabbed by an alien, and she ends up, reflexively triggering her flame unit and burns Frost alive, and he falls over the stairwell. Here's Drake. And the cool thing is that they put their names on the bases for him, and so I ended up doing a little blue effect, like their names as they appear on the screen towards the beginning of the movie when they're on the Sulaco. I kind of stole that idea from Ash Barker on Guerrilla Miniature Gaming. I think he painted his more of a blue. I wanted more of a subtle tone. So I wanted that kind of metallic tone. Looked good too, the way I did the metallic with the bases. So, but Drake is one of the smart gun operators, and he gets dissolved by acid when Vasquez shoots one of the aliens right next to him. Here's all the aliens themselves. These were painted pretty easily, using mostly just dry brushing, like metallic over black, basically, to give them that kind of, steely look they have in the movie. James Cameron lit the movie with a lot of blues, and then I think he may have even treated the film too to some degree to achieve the sort of blue steel effect that his movies have. So the aliens all have kind of a blue tint to them in the movie. I didn't really try and replicate that here, although some miniature paint jobs I've seen have tried to do that. the game that I'm playing right now, this is the first scenario, which is Newt, where the Marines show up at the facility and have to find Newt. Basically, she's in some of these preset little blips here, and the Marines have to try and figure out which one she is. There's also one way up there in operations. They can go here to this computer to figure out where she is. So far I've done that and narrowed it down to that she's in one of these two blips on this far board here. So they're gonna have to go in there and find her. Meanwhile, these other little blips are appearing, and these are called blips. If you remember in the movie, they have these things called motion trackers, which look like this, which show the distance of movement away from the person holding the tracker. And so the way the game works is you don't know how many aliens you're facing until a blip appears. It could be, I think, 0, or it could be as many as 5 aliens. It could be a whole swarm of them. So you just don't know until they end up in your line of sight. And so here, this door is closed and barricaded, so they don't know what these aliens are yet. They've killed some already. Some start here at the entrance to the colony. Oops, this should be here. They start at the entrance to the colony. There's some aliens out there already. They kind of shoot them, move their way in. It's quiet basically for the first 4 turns. You can see they've got an alien that's revealed itself on the board there, and then some more blips. So in the start of the Marines' turn, they will start shooting. As for the rest of the Marines that I have here, so you can only have 6 Marines on the board at a time, even though in the movie, the full contingent of Marines was 9 Marines. So here's Vasquez, the other smart gunner. I kind of tried to replicate, just in a illegible scrawl, the writing that she had on her body armor, and then the adios on the side of her gun, as well as trying to get some, level of detail on her bandana that she wears. The trickiest part about these guys was doing the camouflage of their armor, because their armor has different camouflage than their fatigues. And so that was a trick. I followed Esoteric Order of Gamers channel on YouTube. He did a great painting guide for these Marine figures. And he had a way of doing the camouflage that I think worked out very well, and was accurate to how it looked in the movie. If you look at shots, like set photos and stuff, or still photos of the Marines in the movie, I think they turned out pretty close to the kind of pattern that they had in the movie. So there's Crow. So yeah, the Marines that I have in here at the time, you can have 6, but for the first mission you want to bring Ripley in, because Newt, she has a bonus to dealing with Newt. And I thought the sculpt they did really well with capturing Sigourney Weaver's face. And then they even got her bug stomper boots, which I tried to paint as close as I could to photos that I saw of them from the time. So you want to bring Ripley with you on the first mission so that she can help get Newt. And then we've got Bowski, who has the longest name on the nameplate. He's carrying his flame unit. And it is interesting, I believe they actually have it accurate as to what the characters were carrying in the movie, in terms of what weapon their character had in the movie, because I know Bowski had a flame unit, Dietrich had a flame unit, Frost had a flame unit, and Apone here, who's the Sarge, he had a flame unit in the battle in the reactor room, but here he's got a pulse rifle. I'm not sure if he was carrying a flame unit or what he was carrying prior to the battle in the reactor room, because in the reactor room then they kind of changed the weapons that they were carrying when they first showed up at the colony, just because they couldn't fire their pulse rifles in the reactor room. So like Frost was carrying a pistol. I think Hudson had a pistol. Apone may have also had a pistol. Hicks had his shotgun. And then here's Hudson, the last one. I tried to get his little, he had like the skull and crossbones on his body armor. And he's carrying the motion tracker here, which I could never get a good look at what it actually looked like in the film. I know some people have even tried to paint the little motion tracker thing on his monitor there, but I didn't bother trying to do that. I'd already spent enough time painting these guys just trying to get the camouflage pattern right. The different patterns on the armor versus the fatigues. And then some of the Marines, like you'll notice, Hudson's helmet matches the fatigues, because some of the Marines had the cloth covering on their helmet that matched the fatigues. In this case, if you looked at set photos, it was Hudson, Dietrich, and Frost all had the cloth covering on their helmets, so they had different the fatigue pattern on their helmets instead of the armor pattern. The other Marines all had the armor pattern on their helmets. So, just the kind of research an aliens obsessive like me would take, because if you've seen my video that I did of the old leading edge games aliens, which is up there on the shelf, it's my favorite movie. So it's probably one of the most influential movies for me in terms of my interest in sci-fi and gaming, and miniature painting and all that stuff. It all stemmed from Aliens. It was Aliens that sort of led me to Games Workshop. Although surprisingly, I never played 40K. Once I kind of learned about Games Workshop, instead of going into 40K and the Space Marines, I did dabble in Epic 40K, but they don't make that anymore. And so I never played, traditional just Warhammer 40K. So I ended up gravitating more towards fantasy, and then I get some Lord of the Rings stuff too, and that came out back in the early aughts. And then, kind of fell out of that element of the hobby for many years and got back into niche board gaming and Hex Encounter wargaming. And it's just been the past couple months when Games Workshop announced the release of Cursed City, as well as my plan to paint this for the mini-con, that it just sort of rekindled all of this interest in Games Workshop. And so I went pretty hard back into Games Workshop stuff, and I'll show you some of that stuff here in a minute, just after I kind of recap where we're at in the Aliens game. At the moment, we are on turn 6. I think at the start of turn 6, as you can see, there's a couple aliens. There's a single alien on the board that the Marines can see, and then a number of blips that are floating around that they're going to have to engage with here shortly. What they're trying to do is get over here to these blips, one of whom is Newt, and they will get Newt in tow if Ripley can keep her from running away, and then they need to make their way out back that way to the exit. So they got a ways to go. The game is, interestingly, it is similar in style to, or in inspiration, I guess, to the old Leading Edge games game. And the aliens can move up to 6 spaces. In the Leading Edge game, they always moved 6 spaces. Here it's variable. You basically roll a d6 and see how far all the blips on a particular tile will move for that turn, or the aliens for that matter. Either aliens or blips, you'll roll and see how far they can move. And then the Marines basically have to roll on a d10 when they want to shoot at the aliens. They have these things called aim dials, these little dials that are sitting on their character cards there. Are set to a certain number, like Apone's aim dial at the start of every turn sets to 6, which means the first time he shoots at an alien that turn, he has to roll a 6 or less. And then you can keep shooting at the aliens, like if you have a fully automatic weapon like a pulse rifle, you can keep shooting, but your aim will get lower and lower every time you shoot, making it harder and harder to hit. So eventually you're having to roll less than a 4, less than a 3, less than a 2 on a d10, so it's going to get harder and harder. And everything is done, like the engine of the game is run through this, what's called an endurance deck over here, which is this deck of cards. As you spend cards to do things, such as every time he wants to fire his weapon, it's going to cost him 3 cards to do that. or if he wants to equip weapons or whatever, the costs is what it's weapons or equipment. He'll have to, from his hand, he'll have to pay the cost in cards of moving cards from the endurance deck to the exhaust pile. And then you can move stuff back from the exhaust pile into the endurance deck by having Marines take a rest action. Certain abilities that they have will allow them to recycle cards, which means you can take cards from the exhaust deck and put them back into the endurance deck. Basically, anything you recycle goes under the reshuffle thing. And then once you get down to the bottom of that, then you reshuffle the whole deck and go through it again. What you don't want to do is discard cards. Anytime you have to discard cards, these are basically permanently lost to you for the game. It's very hard to get discarded cards back into your endurance / exhaust piles. So discarding is bad, exhausting is okay, so long as you can kind of keep replenishing, keep cycling cards back in from the exhaust deck to the endurance deck. Because if you run the game as a campaign, and where it strings together a number of scenarios, like I said, I'm on scenario 1 there. If you string together a campaign, you will start to lose cards for the duration of the campaign. So after each scenario that you run, you will permanently lose some of the discard cards that you've discarded that game. And so you'll never get those back. They're out for the rest of the campaign. So as you go through the campaign scenarios, your decks get smaller and smaller, meaning it gets harder and harder for you to win the game, or at least to do all the things that you want to do in a game. So the game ends up being a very, in addition to, managing the tactical situation on the board and making sure your guys don't get swamped by aliens, or that they don't get caught out of position and, somebody gets isolated and or surrounded. You're managing all those tactical elements of, finding whatever the objectives are and moving your team tactically and all that stuff. You're also having to manage your card use, and you have a hand of cards that can be unlimited. And as you play cards out of your hand, you can also recycle cards out of your hand and back into the endurance pile. So it just becomes like sort of card management and, tactical combat, sort of, I don't want to say simulation, but tactical combat exercise, I guess would be a good way to put it. You can play solo. Basically what happens is you control one character that gets all of these like abilities and stuff. And then every other character is on what they call their grunt side, which is basically like a blank side. The flipped version of the, on the other side of this is the hero version. So if you have like a 6-player game, everybody is controlling a hero version that has, full suites of abilities. But if you're playing solo, then you basically have one hero and then 5 grunts that are basically, they don't have their own hand of cards. They have, the lower skills and all that stuff. But you can control them, just the same as you would your ordinary character. How the game makes up for that like lack of special skills that, ordinarily, if you were in a 6-player game, all these players would have all these different special skills that you could bring to bear. Well, what happens is on the alien turn, you're drawing more of these cards. The more actual players you have in the game, you're basically drawing one of these cards for each player you have in the game. So if there's only one of you, the game says you only draw 2 of these motion tracker cards. But if there's 6 of you, you're drawing 6 of these things. So that's how the game, manages the power creep of having 6 players that all have their beefed up heroes. You're just having a lot more aliens that you have to deal with. Whereas, playing the game by myself, I'm only drawing 2 of those every turn and, not getting swamped by aliens. So that's just a quick rundown of, the basics of how the game works. I thought I should at least talk about the game a little bit since I'm actually playing it. This is mainly, I'm playing it now so that I can be able to teach it to the group at the con, without having to sit and look at rules and have to redo a bunch of crap, so it's easier if I've actually played through, a scenario or 2 before we play next week. So giving it a run through. In terms of what I have left to paint, like I said, I painted all the aliens, painted all the characters. I still have some of the expansions, or not an expansion, but you can get these assets and hazards, which are basically like 3D pieces. It's got the sentry guns in the game, face huggers, some alien eggs, computer terminals, and a ton of crates. So I'm working on those right now. You can see the crates. I've started painting the Weyland-Yutani symbol on there. I just undercoated those with metallic because that's how they looked in the box. Undercoated the computer terminals with like a Wraithbone color that looks like good old-fashioned hard 80s PC terminal plastic. And then I've got touching up to do around the screen, around the little disk drive thing there. Still have the enraged Ripley character to paint. You can see here, this is the one where she's carrying Newt as she escapes the nest, and she's got the combo pulse rifle and flame unit duct taped together. Still have to paint the face huggers and the sentry guns, as well as finishing up all the alien eggs. And then the big thing will be to do the, you've got torn in half bishop here, and then doing the power loader. I got it assembled and primed, and same thing for the alien queen, which I'll just do in the similar dry brush pattern. That's the power loader that's going to really be a challenge, just because it's yellow, and painting yellow is not easy. So anyway, yeah, this is my paint station, which I've kind of upgraded in the past. Oops, I'm still zoomed in. I've kind of upgraded in the past month or so as I've returned full bore into painting minis. Over here working on assembling. This is the GW stuff that I've gotten into. I got into Necromunda, which I never actually played back when it came out in '95. As a kid, when I was in high school, this would be early '90s, I played mostly Blood Bowl, and Necromunda came out in '95. Blood Bowl came out in like '87 or '88, and I had the second edition that had the styrofoam pitch on it that you played on, and so that was the version of Blood Bowl I played the most. I don't actually have a copy of that anymore. I want to say this is like maybe 4th edition Blood Bowl, 3rd or 4th edition. I think this is the version that came out in like the early aughts, maybe late 90s, early aughts. And then I just recently bought 2nd season edition, which just came out in like November or maybe mid-year last year. No, maybe it came out early this year. Very recent, just right around the end of the last year, early this year. So going back into that, got Warcry, found a box. Somebody was on a BGG auction, was selling an old box of Necromunda. This is the original release from 1995. Get that sweet Games Workshop 1990s artwork on it. If I were really masochistic, I would look for an old 2nd edition Blood Bowl copy to go down memory lane there. But I just love Necromunda, the artwork on it. The old Hazard Stripes is a big Necromunda affectation, so I'm looking forward to doing some retro painting on this stuff, because this came with, it was a bundle. It came with the Orlocks and the Goliath gang, which came in the box originally, and then it also came with the metal figures that somebody collected of a Delac gang and an Escher gang. So I've got 4 of the 6 gangs for Necromunda, for vintage 1995 Necromunda. Then also picked up Warcry Catacombs and a couple of war bands to paint for Warcry. And then you can see I went heavy into Necromunda. I got both the Necromunda Underhive box, the Necromunda Dark Uprising box, and then this, let's see, Underhive came with Escher and Goliath gangs, and then Dark Uprising came with the Corpse Grinder cults and the Palanite Enforcers. And then to supplement the Goliath gangs that came in here, I picked up the Goliath Stimmers and Forgeborn, and then picked up some Escher, Death Maidens, and Wild Runners, and then picked up a box of Delac, box of Cotter, And then Orlocks, along with their extra box of the Orlock Arms Masters and Wreckers. It's also got the cool cyborg dogs that they've got. So if you're not familiar with Necromunda, it is basically like gangs in space. It's gangs like kind of like urban post-apocalyptic style gang warfare, except that it's not. Some of it is outside in the ash waste, but the rest of it takes place in what they call the hive. And these massive hive cities are like these just huge, giant towers, basically, on these blasted, just wasted planets of these towers of just billions of people that have been around for thousands of years. And there's just so many layers to it. And kind of scurrying around in the underbelly of these massive towers are these gangs that are fighting for territory and resources and wealth and all kinds of stuff. And so it just has a really cool kind of cyberpunk aesthetic to it, but, set in the Warhammer 40K universe. So you've got, the crazy religiosity of the Emperor fanatics. And so that's basically the Cotter gang. Like these are your medieval flagellants almost, just a bunch of like very medieval looking guys that are just crazy religious fanatics for the Emperor. And so, in fact, that's coming out soon, our Redemptionist gangs, which will be a lot of fun to paint because they're basically guys that are all about flamers and burning people, burning the unbelievers. I also finally put together my copy of Space Hulk, and that will be, I think after I paint some Necromunda stuff, I'm finally going to paint Space Hulk. And this I've actually had on my shelf for 7 years because I bought it when they reissued it back in 2014. I bought it and then was intimidated by, the model assembly and the detail on the Marines, the Space Marines, and the painting that would be involved. But now that I've sort of tackled the Aliens project, it has sort of rebuilt my painting confidence. So what I'm going to do is I ordered the White Dwarf from the time that this came out. There were a couple of issues of White Dwarf they had that had like painting tutorials for painting the Space Hulk minis, and so I'm going to do them as best I can according to the actual painting instructions from White Dwarf. How the heavy metal team painted them. So, but just all of this stuff right here is just like the next couple of years of painting, basically. Oh, and I picked up, where did I put them? In addition to the war cries that I got, or the Warcry warbands, which I just picked up the Spire Tyrants and the Unmade. And these guys for the Unmade are pretty cool. They're sort of like crazy Hellraiser-esque, S&M freaks, basically. And so they all ritually flay the skin off their faces and then wear their faces like as belts around them, and then, put helmets over their flayed flesh, and then they kind of just slowly flay more of themselves off and turn themselves into weapons. Like this freak here has removed his limbs and just replaced them with blades and stuff. So just super horrifyingly freaky stuff. So I thought those guys would be cool to paint. And then the other warband here was the Spire Tyrants, who are just more traditional, kind of like Chaos Gladiators. And so I just thought they had a cool look to them. I liked their armor, the kind of gold-edged and black armor. And then picked up a couple of Blood Bowl teams. I had to get the Greenfield Grasshuggers, the Halfling team, just because they were always one of my favorites. As just the funniest, most futile team in Blood Bowl from back in 2nd edition. And then more recently, that just came out, picked up the Dwarf Giants Blood Bowl team, which was another one of my favorites from the old 2nd edition days. And then picked up the Skaven Blight Scramblers, which was a Skaven team, which I never played in the old days. But I picked up the Dwarf Pitch. One of the nice things about the new Blood Bowl is that, first of all, they have all these teams available to buy just as a team. It was much harder to get the teams, all together as a team, like in a box. In the old 2nd edition, you had to kind of cobble stuff together. And now you can just buy them all conveniently put together in a box. But I got the Skaven and Dwarf pitch, which is, you know, like a board that's themed for those particular teams to play on. And the Skaven and Dwarf one was together in one box. So I was like, well, I should get a Skaven and Dwarf teams then, and they can use both sides of the pitch. And so that is all of the just miniature based hole that I've dived, down in my reintroduction to miniature painting. And so what I'm doing over here right now is I'm assembling the Corpse Grinder cults for Necromunda. These are the guys that came in the Dark Uprising box. And these guys are basically, they're just, you can't really see in the lighting too well, but these guys are just basically like a cannibal cult that worships chaos. And they're just, you know, cannibal demons, basically, just horrifying freaks. And so in the Dark Uprising set, basically these guys are taking over the entire hive, and they're facing off against the Palanite enforcers, which are basically the police, the hive police. And so that's the next group I have to assemble. I've got their sprues out. I've finished the Corpse Grinder cults, so I've got, you know, stuff left for bits should I need it. But all the minis have been assembled for a full squad or a full gang of Corpse Grinders. Here are the retro Necromunda pieces that I have. So these are the old Goliath, the retro Goliath pieces. Some of them had arms missing, but the copy that I bought came with a bits bag that basically has all these arms in it. So I'll go through and fix these guys. I'm looking forward to painting them in a retro, you know, circa 1990s vibrant color Games Workshop scheme. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then here's the 1990s Orlocks, and these guys were basically, the Orlocks were basically like the biker gang. They basically wear leather jackets, you know, the black leather jackets, and then they have like the white, they're not loincloths in this case because they have pants on there, almost like they're grease rags, you know, for working in the garage or working on their engines or whatever. You know, they got the shoulder pads, they're just the red bandanas. So they're just, you know, classic Harley biker gang. And then I had the metal minis. These are the Delac sculpts. And these guys are basically like the trench coat weirdos, like the spies and brokers of information and stuff like that. So they're not like the Goliath, who are like the meatheads, or the Orlocks, who are kind of the all around, you know, ranged weapon fighters. These guys love knives and like kind of short range weapons. And it came with a full squad of these guys, and then the juvies as well, which are like the young initiates to the gang, had 2 juvies. And then it also came with Eschers, a squad of Eschers. They're segregated out over here because I'm going to strip them. It looks like some of them, the old ones, are primed white, and I'm going to reprime them with a little better prime job. And then they've got some old paint on them. Strip all that off and then reprime them white, so I can paint them fresh. And then the rest of these are actually the miniatures for the old Aliens Leading Edge game. And I've had these, you know, since 1989 or so when the game came out, and had primed them years and years ago, but never actually painted them. And I thought, you know, now that I've figured out finally how to do the camouflage pattern, you can see I kind of started to, I did flesh tones there. But now that I've kind of figured out how to do the camouflage pattern on the Gale Force 9 game, I'm going to strip these guys off, reprime them white, because I think it was easier to paint the Gale Force 9 Aliens figures on a white prime base. So I'm going to do that here for these guys. And I think now I can actually do it. And these guys are the right scale for the Leading Edge games. You know, it would be tempting to use these minis over here for the Leading Edge game, because I actually like the Leading Edge game better than the Gale Force 9 game. You know, the Gale Force 9 game is cool, has lots of visual stuff, it's got all the cards and all the chrome, but the leading edge games, Aliens, is just much simpler, but also more exciting because you're not having to deal with all these cards and fiddly crap, all the chromed up stuff. It is a very elegant, simple, fast playing, super fun, great narrative system. And, obviously Gale Force 9 couldn't just copy the old leading edge games, Aliens game, because, nowadays, like, there's not enough to that. They needed to have expansions. They needed to be able to add cards. They needed to be able to, do stuff that was going to, like, quote unquote modernize the game, but really didn't do anything other than just make it more complicated and kind of fiddly to play. It doesn't, the cards and stuff don't really add anything to the narrative that the old leading edge game was already able to create. And but maybe I'm just biased because I played that game so many times. Regardless, I at least now know how to paint the Marines well enough that I can paint them for the old game and now enjoy them in that game as well and lend it, a little bit of magic. So yeah, lots and lots of painting coming up. So what does that mean for my wargaming? It is obviously taking a back seat. If you remember the last video I posted, I think was about War Between the States, which has been returned back to the shelf there. I just realized it was taking up all this table space, and there's no way. I had just lost all interest in it when I went down this minis rabbit hole and didn't want to leave it sitting out there taunting me. So I only made it through maybe 5 or 6 turns of that before I just put it all away. I'll get back to it someday. I'm sure my mini painting fanaticism will burn itself out here soon enough, and I'll just be back to Hex Encounter stuff. I'll still play some Hex Encounter stuff too. I want to get to, I got In Magnificent Style over there from Worthington Games, which I really want to play, and that would be fairly easy to do. I'd also like to do Custer's Last Stand, also from Worthington Games. I got a couple of those recently that I wouldn't mind getting out and playing through. And also just this week, Atlantic Chase showed up from GMT, as well as Bayonets and Tomahawks, and both of those I would like to dabble with. So, smaller scenarios or stuff I'll probably bust out just to, kind of break up the minigaming monotony. So there will be some, probably be posting stuff, I'll definitely post something on In Magnificent Style when I get to that. I may post other wargaming videos as the, as I feel compelled to, if I'm playing something that I'm particularly enjoying or whatever. We'll see. But it has largely been focused on just minis and minis and more minis. So we'll see what I feel like doing. I may start posting some mini painting updates, which would be, a departure from what I've usually done on the channel, but it's been pretty fun kind of re-exploring this side of the hobby. I painted, like I said, I dabbled in it decades ago, and kind of jumping back into it again has been fun. And it's not like I don't have lots of, like classic board games, or, not Hex Encounter stuff, but Ameritrashy type stuff that isn't full of minis to paint already, in particular Zombicide, which I actually started painting last year and just got like overwhelmed by the fact that there were, just 60 or 70 zombies alone, in addition to painting the heroes. And so I started painting them and then just completely fell off the wagon for it. So that's probably something I can work on there too, now that I'm kind of back into it again and getting faster at painting stuff and better at painting stuff. And that's just going to come through volume. So, who knows? I'll either start working my way through all this stuff or just burn myself out again. And then I'll be back, playing monster war games again. So we'll see. It'll be fun. It'll be fun either way, but I am looking forward to starting to work my way through the GW stuff. And definitely if I get a Once I start working through the Necromunda stuff, that's got all the terrain and everything too, which really looks cool, set up on a table and everything. So, it's likely once I start getting that stuff done and opting to start playing that I'll film some video of that stuff too, just to get, the cool looking table set up and stuff on camera. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes.